Hey everybody, Stuart here, and we got a unanimous vote from our subscribers and viewers on the channel saying that they want to have our sales and business development series with Peter McAdam to continue on. So here we are again. Today we're talking about stubbornness. Now, this is something as a salesman that you do need to a certain extent, but when it comes to overdoing it, where do you think that salespeople often fall over when it comes to stubbornness?
I think, Stuart, traditionally salespeople are stubborn. We can't get away from that fact. And, they're quite conservative in many ways. They like the same old techniques. Now, we all know that with the world that has changed, a lot of the same old just doesn't work anymore. So you need to acquire new skills. You need to do things differently. So change a few things up and be flexible, because if something doesn't work, you definitely have to change it up. There's no same old, same old. It's just not going to work.
Where do you think stubbornness comes in handy when you're a salesperson?
Well, I think it's often equated with tenacity. And I think that's a good thing. You know, if you use tenacity instead of stubbornness or try and equate them, I suppose they are similar in many ways. That's good, because you have to stick at something, but you need to stick at something that actually works. Now, there's a difference between stubbornness that works and stubbornness that doesn't work. Let's focus more on the tenacity, if we can call it that, of stubbornness that does actually work when you're following up and trying to conclude a deal.
Kind of leads in quite well to my next question, which is I guess, the good traits of being a stubborn salesman. And it seems like being able to follow up consistently with people that might be very good prospects, but take a while to make a decision might be one of those things that can really move you forward and move your career and your business forward.
Yes, look, when you're following up, the different stages you need to cover in following up. Number one is you need to be quick. Number two, you need to know what you're talking about. Number three, answer the questions that people have actually asked you. Don't be long-winded and go on, off on a tangent, trying to, get back to them with stuff they didn't actually ask you about. Just follow up properly. And if people only learned to follow up briefly, succinctly, and answer questions that people have asked, they can cut through a lot of the nonsense and actually get the sale much quicker.
So we talked a little bit about some of the positive aspects of stubbornness. What about some of the negative aspects? What are the things that you've noticed over your career as a salesman and a business owner? And what are the things that people can do to stamp those things out?
Look, I mean, the biggest thing here is flexibility. When you try something out and it doesn't work, you need to be flexible enough to try something differently. And when I say something differently, that comes from experience and from training. And that training can be one-on-one with a consultant or sales trainer, a business development trainer, or it can come from working on the job. So experiencing, sitting in front of a customer, listening to questions, answering the questions, seeing what works and what doesn't work. But the key thing here is flexibility. If you don't have flexibility and you believe same old is going to work, it's pretty clear if there's a problem that it's not working. So, that's my advice to people, is to just be a little more aware of what's working and what isn't, and flexible enough to change it up so that you can get that ultimate sale that you do want.
Have you ever found there has been times where you've been a bit more stubborn than you should in a sales meeting?
Stuart, I think as you get more experienced in sales, you tend to be a little more stubborn than you normally would be. I think younger salespeople are more open to getting training and learning from mistakes. The older you get in sales, unfortunately, there are a lot of us that get, a lot more stubborn, and you don't really want to change things up. And so I have found that you really need to be open-minded here about training and development and actually focus on things that don't work in your selling spiel. Now, there are a lot of stuff, that does work, and clearly you're going to get business with things that work, but you're going to lose sales with things that don't work. So, yeah, I mean, early on we spoke about stubbornness and tenacity. Don't confuse the two because the one works and the other one doesn't. So, learn how to fix mistakes.
Well, I'm going to be stubborn. I'm going to ask you the same question again because you didn't answer it. Have there been times where you have been too stubborn in a sales meeting, and what did you learn from that experience to give you a little follow up?
Yeah, well, look, stubbornness can come in many forms, Stuart. I mean, I think in some of the interactions I've had with people, perhaps some of the stubbornness has stemmed from being inflexible with pricing, maybe. There is a certain limit you could come down to sometimes if you want to conclude a deal. And sometimes stubbornness has actually paid off when you don't drop your pricing necessarily just to get a sale, but try and get something better. So I've had wins and losses doing that. And I think what I've learned over the years, though, is to be a little more flexible when it comes to that and maybe not as stubborn as I used to be in earlier years. Yeah.
We're speaking with Peter McAdam, who is the sales trainer at McAdemy. His website is developmorebusiness.com. And we've been talking today about stubbornness in sales and how it can swing both ways to be both positive and negative. Have you ever encountered people that you thought have been too stubborn for their own good or too tenacious for their own good? And has your view of those encounters changed as you've gotten older and wiser?
Look, I mean, as you move along in sales and go through the motions, you learn to pick up a lot more on human behavior. You learn to read the boardroom better, if I can put it that way. And yes, over the years, there have been many, many stubborn salespeople, not salespeople, many stubborn procurement people that I've dealt with. They're used to doing things a certain way. They ask you all the same questions that every other buyer or procurement manager would ask you. And they don't seem to understand, though, that there is a need for some flexibility. We've moved on from this stubbornness in procurement, stubbornness in sales, and you need to get more of a handle on human nature. Learn what makes somebody tick. What inspires them and what motivates them, and play on those things a lot more. And I think this is where a lot of procurement people come unstuck. Their stubbornness is to actually get you into a corner, and they want to commit you to something you don't necessarily, as a salesperson, want to give, like cheaper pricing, more volume at discounted pricing, or whatever it is that they want. So over the years, yes, there have been plenty of stubborn procurement managers and directors I've dealt with. However, I think once you get to a softer side of them, and what I mean by that is getting to know them a bit better, talking about different things, learning what motivates and inspires them, like I said, um, you might come across a different person, somebody easier to please and easier to do a deal with.
And how influential is that when you are developing business internationally?
Look, it's no different whether you developing business internationally or domestically. The basics remain the same. You have to get to know the person you're sitting in front of. You need to get your spiel across, get the information across, get the benefits of doing business across to them. And you need some different benefits versus some of your competitors. So it's essential also that you've done some homework on these people you're sitting in front of, as well as the companies maybe that you're sitting in front of, so that you have a better understanding of what it is that you need to come up with to actually do a deal with them. So, yeah, I mean, the basics remain the same. I think the difference come in the nuances, culturally. It is different, to negotiate with Asian people versus African people versus Europeans or Americans, South Americans. Everybody is different, Stuart, in that regard. But when it comes to business, most things are actually surprisingly enough the same. And tactics and techniques that get used, things you have to watch for, look out for, they're pretty much the same.
Very good. I can only imagine probably the thing that I would find the most frustrating is if I hopped on a plane, I traveled 12, 16 hours to the other side of the world, only to be met with someone that wanted to take me out for like a breakfast when you're sort of really tired and exhausted, and they want to start negotiating this great deal and this great pricing for you. You're absolutely cooked, and they won't budge on their position at all, and they'll say that's the only way that in which they can do it. How would you go about trying to pull things back and retake control in a position like that if someone finds themselves in that type of situation?
Look, I think that kind of stubbornness, does work for a lot of procurement people. And I think exhaustion on your part is actually not a good idea. So one of my first recommendations would be is to try and get to a destination, at least 24 hours before you have meetings with procurement people or directors or staff. If you don't, you're tired. When you're tired, you get a little bit irritable, and you tend to do things you might regret afterwards in terms of offering cheaper pricing, just so that you can get out of that meeting room and back to your hotel so that you can actually get some rest and some sleep. So rest up, prepare, for those meetings well in advance, and arrive at your destination in a more timely manner. And when I say that, don't fly at the last minute, jump off the plane and head off into meetings. That's a big no-no. It's a mistake, and it's not going to serve you well at all. So once again, be careful when you arrive at destinations internationally, because I've had experiences like that, particularly meetings in Singapore and Japan. I pretty much jumped off the plane straight into the meetings, and I don't recommend it because the outcomes are not always what you want as an outcome.
Mm. Just coming to the end of the chat today, I wanted to ask you a bit more of a personal question. Where exactly did you learn how to sell it? Did you read particular books? Did someone give you sort of training tips and advice? Was it sort of all learnt on the fly?
Good question, Stuart. I think I've always liked selling from a very young age. I remember when I was about 5, 6 years old, I started making catapults and wire cars and selling pencils and books and all kinds of things. And I've always gotten a buzz out of selling. And not everybody wants to buy something off of you at a point in time. And I learned from a young age actually to persuade people to do something they don't necessarily want to do. And this is where selling skills actually do come in handy. Whether they innate, like I suppose a lot of them were for me, or whether they are acquired by experience, you do need training if it doesn't come naturally. But ultimately, I think you need to want a certain outcome when you're selling. And I always wanted a positive outcome. So you need to do the things that are going to get you a sale. However, you also need to get the buyer to do some things they don't necessarily want to do, like pay a higher price, take a longer contract, or do something. So I've loved negotiation all my life, Stuart, and it's a give and take thing. So you give a little, you take hopefully a lot more. Not necessarily. I'm just kidding, but you need to trade and swap things. And once you've swapped sufficiently, hopefully you get the deal across. That you want with the outcome that you want. It doesn't always happen, but I think if you do things the right way, and there is a process in place for that, generally the outcomes are positive. Yeah.
Hmm. So you've half answered the question. When it comes to books, or sales training books, or sales workshops or presentations that you've been to and attended, been a part of, are there any that you would recommend, or ones that you would say that you really got a lot out of?
Look, the best presentations I've been to have been interactive ones where you actually learn a bit of knowledge, you get taught how to develop business, how to sell smarter, psychology of selling, some strategy, negotiation tips, and then you put it into practice yourself with some of your teammates that are present there. And those ones in my career have always been the better ones, where you're actually practicing, what you've learned. And I think if you want to acquire skills, there needs to be some repetition of what you've learned, and at the same time there also needs to be recall on your side. So you've acquired some skills, you need to recall them, and you need to practice. Now every time you see a customer, you're hopefully practicing, but every time you see a new customer, after you've learned some of these skills, you keep reinforcing what you've learned. And hopefully you also learn from your mistakes. There are some things you just don't do when you sell, some things you don't say. And I think as you get more and more proficient with your skills, you'll learn to close a deal via a certain process. And yeah, I hope that answers the question, because there are all kinds of different ways to learn selling skills. You can read books, you can go to courses, you can do consulting, but those interactive ones where you can actually do a bit of practice are most likely the best ones.
Hmm. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you for help with sales training and business development training, or they want to buy your ebook, where can they go for that?
Look, my ebook is called Selling Smarter, and that one delves into the psychology of selling, what to look out for, what to do, and how to close those deals, how to avoid distractions. My mobile number is 021 357 784, and my website is www.developmorebusiness.com. And people are welcome to call me. I think it's good in the first instance to call me. Let's have a chat about what the issues are that you're facing. I know there are a lot of challenges at the moment in business because of the state of the economy, but things are getting better. So let's teach you some skills that are going to be worthwhile and actually get you on the right track, so that when things improve, which they are, you're just going to do that much better with some of the new skills you're going to learn and acquire and put into practice.
Very good. We'll leave it there. Peter McAdam, thanks very much for coming back on the channel.
Thank you, Stuart. Good talking. Yep.